All right, welcome to our online training for the Levine Scholars Grant at the Kings Mountain Historical Museum. This is a community project that we're going to be doing through the Levine Scholars Program at UNC Charlotte. This is a grant that we've received to improve our collection storage here at Kings Mountain Historical Museum, and we'll give you a little background on what we do here at the museum. Our mission is to preserve the history of Kings Mountain and the surrounding region. We preserve 3 historic buildings here. The main post office building is our exhibit space and our administrative space. The post office was built in 1940. We also have the 1830 Barber Log House and the 1870s Cornwell Home, which are preserved here on site. We manage a growing collection of artifacts that include archives, such as documents, broadsides, postcards, letters, correspondence, all sorts of things that are two-dimensional items. We also preserve photographs that relate to the history of Kings Mountain and the surrounding region. So you see some of the photographs from our collection specifically that speak to the history of Kings Mountain and the surrounding region. We also have a growing collection of objects. So these are our 3-dimensional items, and these items are stored in a separate location in the museum. We have a collection storage space in our basement, and that will be the focus of the Levine Scholars Grant program, and the project that we'll be doing is to improve the storage and the long-term preservation of the 3-dimensional items in our collection so that we can continue to collect and preserve these items and interpret them for future generations. Our objects, again, are what are stored in the basement. Our archives and our photos are stored upstairs in our safe. But our objects are stored in the basement, and we need to do some work down there. So you see some shelving, some nice archival boxes. We're using nice techniques like wearing gloves, using partners to help lift boxes. So these are the things that we're going to be doing as part of this project, is putting together archival boxes, putting shelving together, and identifying items that need to be better stored in our collection storage area. So to give you all a little training, a little background on how we do what we do to preserve the lifespan of objects, we've put this presentation together today. So over time, all objects are going to begin to deteriorate for a variety of reasons. So every item on the planet is going to slowly deteriorate through environmental conditions, use, and natural decay. So what we're trying to do with our collections are to increase the lifespan of objects to the extent that we can. So we do this through proper preservation techniques and preventative conservation measures, which we'll talk a little bit about. So again, the goal here is to slow down an object's rate of deterioration and extend the life of the object, and that's what we'll be doing here. So some of the agents of deterioration, these are the forces of chemical and physical damage that will destroy your items over time. And these are things to be aware of. So physical forces, of course, this could be just knocking something over. Fire, water, pests, pollutants, light, temperature, and humidity are huge in terms of preservation, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Theft, vandalism, and of course disassociation. So when you have lost the original context of something, that really is a method of deterioration in and of itself. So the types of materials that we'll be dealing with in our 3D collections include organic materials. Organic materials are those that are associated with the chemistry of carbons. So these are organic materials that were the byproducts of living things, either plants or animals. Most of our textiles are going to be organic, so they're going to be made of cotton, linen, silk, wool. We'll also have things like fur, bone, ivory, feathers, shell, all sorts of wood, including paper. We'll have all sorts of paper documents, paintings, can also be on organic materials. So organic materials are the most susceptible and vulnerable to those agents of deterioration that we've talked about. And so these are the things that we really need to put a lot of effort into identifying and preserving and making ideal preservation environments for these types of materials. We also have inorganic materials in our collection. So in contrast to organic materials, these are the things that are not associated with once living plants or animals, but rather have geological origin. So these are mineral-based rather than carbon-based. And so these include stone items, ceramics, glass, metals, and all sorts of composite items that are made of a variety of things, such as those glasses that you see there, which are made of glass. It looks like we have some plastic, metal, all sorts of different components on a composite object like that. So we will treat all objects with care. We're going to handle all objects with care and treat them with the same preservation conditions. But it's important to know the distinction between organic and inorganic materials in the way that we preserve those items long term. Some general rules for handling objects. So part of this project will be moving some items around, doing research and rehousing these items. And so what we're going to do is we're going to handle all artifacts as little as possible. The oils, acids, and salts in human skin and human hands will damage most types of materials over time. So we always wear gloves when we work with our collections. We use cotton gloves. We also use nitrile or latex gloves. You use them for different purposes and depending on your comfort level. You take time when you're handling, so don't rush, and handle each object as if it were precious, valuable, and delicate. Cleanliness is essential, so we don't smoke anywhere near the building or near the collections. We don't eat or drink around our objects. And we're aware of our jewelry, our belt buckles, anything that's on our body that may damage objects while we're handling them. So this is just some evidence of the effects of human oils on artifacts. You can see on the left-hand side fingerprints. If you leave a fingerprint on a nicely polished candlestick, for instance, in 10 years your fingerprint will actually be etched into the metal. So the acids in your skin have a very powerful effect on the chemistry of the items that you're handling. This is why we use gloves. Fingerprints etched onto photo emulsion on the right-hand side. So we never want to handle photographs by touching the emulsion or the face of the photograph. We always use gloves in those instances. This is kind of a cheeky example of evidence of human oils on metals. So all metals will eventually deteriorate and interact with their environment. They create a nice patina, which will give it both a nice effect as well as preserve the metal long term. So the patina of a metal, the oxides that you see in a great example on the right, is actually preserving that metal. If you polished a bronze every day or polished a silver every day, eventually you would run out of metal because as you're polishing, you're reducing a thin layer of the metal. So what you're seeing here is evidence of where humans have touched with bare hands on the metal and have deteriorated that patina over time. So you're seeing the raw metal underneath in those examples. A little bit more about handling. So when we carry large or bulky or heavy objects, we always use a partner, and you discuss each person's role before moving an artifact so you know what direction you're going. You have your route planned out before you pick something up. Make sure doors are open and obstacles are cleared every time you're headed to move an item before you move it, so you don't end up with something heavy in your hands and your path is blocked. Handle only one object at a time using both hands. You can use protective gear such as gloves, masks, goggles when necessary. You pick up objects by their most solid part. So that piece on the bottom where this woman is holding a bell is a great example. You wouldn't hold something by the rim or by a handle. You want to pay attention to areas that may be loose or weak, maybe have had previous damage or repairs. And you want to rest the object on its most stable surface when you're setting it down and storing. So if you're carrying a jug, for instance, you would carry it by two hands using the base. You can use additional supports for objects in transit, so you can use carrying trays, rigid supports, or trolleys, and basically just use common sense and your best judgment when handling. Treat every item as if it's precious. So those agents of deterioration that we've talked about, just going over these again, we're going to get into some of them in particular. Harmful lighting is something that you want to be aware of. In our storage space, we limit the lighting that's available down there, the UV lighting, by covering the windows. So you'll see that when you enter our collection space. We use proper lighting in our exhibit space as well to reduce deterioration over time. We have temperature and humidity control in one of our large storage spaces downstairs, which allows us to control temperature and humidity effectively to preserve our collections over time. So you'll notice a temperature and humidity change as we go into that room versus the other basement rooms. Pollutants and contaminants to be aware of. So we're going to be keeping dust off of items. We're going to be keeping sticky things like tape and anything that would have adhesives on it, keeping those away from our collections because those degrade over time. We're also going to be keeping an eye out for any pests that may have infested the collections at any point. So you may see beetles, crickets, silverfish, cockroaches, evidence of mice, moths, mold, fungus. Any of these things can infect your collections. And these are some things to be aware of and just keep an eye on as we're working on this project. Evidence of pest damage can include areas of loss, holes, or tunnels. You may see frass, which is that image on the right where you can see basically the waste products of insects, spotting, speckling, staining. You may see larval skins or castings or egg cases of pests, and so that's all things to be aware of as we're looking at these collections. There are ways to treat pest infestations, and we do want to be aware of them as we're going forward. This is just evidence of what pests can do. Dermestid beetles are particularly damaging to natural fibers like wool, several of those examples that you see here. Some other things that you'll see will be silverfish, like the ones that you see up at the top left. Carpet beetles. This is the carpet beetle right here. That is something that we have actually had in this collection before, so it's something we're going to pay attention to. And these are the different stages of the carpet beetle, so you could see them walking around as a little beetle, or you may see them in their various larval and egg stages. So just something to be aware of as we're working through these collections. We want to identify and isolate items that have been infested. We shouldn't have too many problems as we have been working through our collections, but these things do affect any collection that has natural items. We'll also want to be aware of mold and mildew. Mold and mildew always exist in the environment, but as we control temperature and humidity, we control the spread of mold and mildew. But items that are highly affected by mold and mildew, we may isolate and treat. Why are we keeping things in archival housing, and why is this important to this project? So archival or conservation quality materials are those that are physically durable and chemically stable. So they're typically inert. They don't release degradation products or off gases or chemicals that are going to harm the objects that are in our collections. So we use acid-free housing. Sometimes we use buffered materials, which helps as well with long-term preservation. And these are housing materials that will greatly increase the lifespan of artifacts over time. So these are the types of things that we'll be using with this project. So we are very excited to complete this project here at Kings Mountain Historical Museum to improve our collection storage and to preserve the artifacts that speak to the region's heritage and cultural identity.